This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning. Hey.
Hey.
Who are you?
I'm Katie. Who are you?
I'm Chelsea.
What are we talking about this week? Should we just jump into it? It feels heavy.
It's very heavy. We're talking about the school to prison pipeline. It's not going to be an easy one for us, so we're going to try our best to navigate it, but bear with us because it's a tough one.
I feel like we got kind of tired with the Common Core, like it was kind of heavy.
The Common Core was heavy too.
But then we went away from it.
Yeah.
And the last two, were fine.
Mm-hmm. We love music.
And then I had, real homework to do.
We love our cell phones. Right.
And now I'm tired.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time trying to prepare for this one, but it still feels like we only just scratched the surface.
I feel like I'm not even getting close to it. I also feel like before we even get into this one that we have to just be as open and honest as possible and be explicitly clear in how white we are and how far away from this problem that we truly are.
Right. I would say we enjoy benefits of a lot of privilege. And this is not probably a problem that we are super up close and personal with.
I mean, I see it a little bit with my kids, but not even as much as
the
cases that are in this.
You're closer to it than I am, but it's certainly something that we both care deeply about. So we're trying to deal with it as delicately as we can at the end.
I'm excited about this one because I came up with this topic to Chelsea because one of my seniors chose it for a research project, like a writing assignment. And I mean, I've heard of it, but nothing of any real sort of depth, I suppose. But I was telling you about it, and you had an interest in it, so we added it to our list. But I'm really excited because it's cool for me now to get to talk about it with you when it came from one of my kids. So I think that's kind of exciting, actually.
Yeah, the closest I've come to this kind of stuff is I've done some work with some nonprofits having to do with prisons and keeping people out of prison.
Yeah.
There's an organization in New Jersey I've worked with that does advocacy to kind of keep people out of prison who shouldn't necessarily be in prison, who might be there because of disparities in the justice system that disproportionately affect certain groups. So I'm definitely interested in this kind of, in this topic and advocacy surrounding it, but it is a really rough one, so...
I feel like I only kind of got a little idea of what it was like. One of my placements in college was at a county juvenile detention center. And so I spent a whole semester going there 2 days a week. It was 4 hours a day. Over a semester. I got a lot of exposure. It was very eye-opening, I would say. But I haven't had to deal with it in any sort of really familiar way. And I mean, I was dealing with it then, but I didn't know what it was called, obviously. So now I'm thinking back to that time 8 years ago, and I'm like, oh, that checks out. Yeah, but I just didn't know it. When I got put there, I was just like, wow, shell shock.
It has a name because it's such a prevalent problem in United States public schools. A lot of advocacy groups are trying to draw attention to this problem, and part of doing that is kind of giving it a name that people can organize around. Yeah. So that's where this name that you would see in print sometimes, the school to prison pipeline, became a thing. It's pretty disgusting that it's a thing, honestly. This is not really a thing that a developed nation should be claiming.
No, sadly.
We should not have an entire mechanism that is built and functions around the idea of sending children to prison from school. But here we are faced with the reality that it happens, and it happens a lot more than probably either of us realized. And that's kind of why we want to pay a bit of attention to it and inform our listeners about it. It's a real challenging one.
Also, education loves abbreviations. So this is just one more to throw on the hat.
It is.
Because everything you read is just SPP. So if you've seen that somewhere, I mean, I can't say all of them are about the school to prison pipeline, but it seems to be a pretty prevalent topic currently.
Yep. So just sort of definitionally, the school to prison pipeline, at least in the U.S., is this known as this kind of disproportionate tendency of minors and young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds, especially, to become incarcerated because of increasingly harsh school and municipal policies.
Yeah, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund depicts the pipeline as a, quote, funneling of students out of school and into the streets in the juvenile correction system, perpetuating a cycle that deprives children and youth of meaningful opportunities for education, future employment, and participation in our democracy.
Yeah. So that's really what's so troubling about this is, I mean, you can imagine going directly from school to prison puts you at a huge disadvantage.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids that get funneled into this system never graduate high school.
No.
And therefore don't pick up a lot of the tools that set them up for success later in life. So recidivism is a big issue for a lot of students entering the school to prison pipeline.
Yep.
Further issues with employment, all kinds of things come later down the line from this popping up earlier in their lives, really much earlier than any of us probably than either of us would have thought we would have had to think about these kinds of things. So
well, and the one thing that we talked about, like Chelsea and I talked about briefly, was like our want to sort of represent this evenly. Like when we try to research something, we try to get the sides. So like when you hear us talking, you're going to hear like the NAACP and the ACLU and things like that coming up a lot, because that's where a lot of the research and data and stats are coming from. And it's kind of a hard thing to get. Like, I don't know what the other side is, I guess, is kind of where I'm at with it. Yeah. Like, you're going to hear where we're getting it from, and it's going to be obviously racially driven, but it's not.
Right. The deal is this is a very difficult subject, and it hits very close to home, and it's very hard to find quote unquote neutral research on the topic because, and I mean, at least as far as I'm concerned, there's not really a whole lot to be neutral about when we're talking about funneling kids into prisons. Right. I don't think there's a kind of neutral third party voice with which to discuss this issue. So we're going to try to uncover our own biases about it as much as possible along the road. But we know just from our own perspectives that we have some pretty serious issues with sending kids directly to prisons for whatever reason. So that's just kind of something in our own background. So we're going to try to mitigate and, just be as informational as possible. But this is a kind of touchy topic for justified reasons.
And Chelsea's going to post all of the links for you guys to go and to check out for yourselves, because obviously this is not something you should just take us for as the whole truth. But
we're nowhere near experts on this subject. We are going to post all the links in the show notes at our website. If you have any questions or other resources that you'd want us to know about, go ahead and write in on our contact page. We'd be happy to hear from you.
For most students, the pipeline begins with inadequate resources in public schools, overcrowded classrooms, a lack of qualified teachers, and insufficient funding, counselors, special ed services, and textbooks. All of these things lock students into second-rate educational environments. And so this failure to meet educational needs increases their disengagement and dropouts, increasing the risk of later court involvement.
So in addition to these kind of material factors about, like you were saying, overcrowded classrooms.
This is Maslow's. Right? This is Maslow's, like from top to bottom.
A lot of it is about meeting needs and how schools are failing to meet basic needs. So in addition to those sort of material factors, there are these psychological ones, and there's some really challenging stats on this stuff. I was reading about the sort of psychology behind the school to prison pipeline, why some of this stuff happens in the first place. And I was reading that school-age children today are experiencing record levels of depression and anxiety alongside multiple forms of trauma, which just, So according to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the suicide rate among children ages 10 to 17 increased by 70% between 2006 and 2016.
And we're talking about we're both high school graduates of 2008.
Yeah.
So we're like right in the thick of it as far as like kind of seeing firsthand this shift, I guess. I mean, maybe not that either of us came from a place of real interesting background or flavor or anything like that, but I mean, maybe there was more of it happening around us than we saw.
Yeah, I wish I had had more visibility on it at the time. I knew that there were a couple of incidents in and around the time I was in high school that really shook the community that were related to depression and suicide. But
we had a few as well.
But this just kind of blew my mind. The suicide rate increasing by 70% in that 10-year span.
Yeah.
Approximately 72% of kids in the U.S. will have experienced at least one major stressful event, such as witnessing violence, experiencing abuse, or experiencing the loss of a loved one before the age of 18. Woof.
Yeah, this is heavy. I'm already bummed. So from this research, though, they say that students are 21 times more likely to visit school-based health centers for treatment than anywhere else. And this is good in that, well, no, let me take that back. Scratch that. Don't put any of that anywhere. Beep. I was going to go into how it's good that they will get help there. I think I was trying to open up the door for that, but they're not getting it because there is no to get.
Right.
Okay.
The issue is they're far more likely to do it at school. The downside of that is that schools have so few resources
and
available.
We're trying to get funding at my current school to have that. But even if we did, and the person that does help, the school psychologist, she's all district. She's not just in high school alone could use just one. Most middle school for sure. But so, in a district our size, we're sharing one. So that's kind of adding to the complications.
How big is the district where you work?
Close to 2,000. I'd say right around there.
2,000 students total, and you have one school psychologist servicing that population.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
2,000 people.
No, we're trying to get funding for more, obviously. What school doesn't want to try to get more support and resources? But the money's hard to get. They're not cheap. And so they're at, it's hard. Schools are in a tough spot with this. So it does say that schools that employ more school-based mental health providers see improved attendance rates, lower rates of suspension and other disciplinary incidents, expulsion, improved academic achievement, and career prep, and improves their graduation rates, obviously. Those things all. That's just one big formula. You know what I mean? All of those things add up together. But the data does show that the school staff who provide health and mental health services to our kids not only improve the health outcomes for them, but also school safety, which is top of my list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're going to talk later in the show about what sorts of resources and what kinds of staff members are really proven to reduce violence in schools and safety and improve safety, and which ones aren't proven to do that, which might be contrary to popular opinion about some of these things. So yeah, one thing I wanted to note that I found while I was researching this, our friend No Child Left Behind came back up.
I walk away.
It came back up in the research,
podcast.
Right? It reappeared. We're gonna do a whole show on NCLB at some point, but
without me.
No, but No Child Left Behind.
Find a guest host, please.
I know. Maybe we will for that show. The No Child Left Behind Act can actually encourage dropouts and some of the problems associated with the school to prison pipeline because it incentivizes pushing out lower performing students to boost the overall test score for a district or a school or whatever. So this act that's supposed to actually guarantee more students succeed more often has the reverse effect of pushing out the most challenged students and sending them directly, kind of just trying to push them out so that there's the appearance of doing better without the actuality of doing better.
It's not helping them in the long run to do this. The students aren't better because of it. The system isn't better. And if we're talking high school report cards, for me, the report cards by the state are terrible. It's the biggest bummer every time those come out. So it's not doing anything for anyone. So why don't you tell us about school disturbance laws?
Yeah, school disturbance laws was a thing. I hadn't heard specifically about this kind of group of laws, although I'm sure I've heard of incidents that have to do with this kind of thing. But there are these laws in the U.S. that prohibit and instill penalties for people found guilty of disturbing the operations of a school, which on the surface sounds nice. You want to be able to fight back against forces that would interrupt a student's opportunity to learn. However, these laws criminalize the idea of disturbing school, whatever that means. Originally, this was supposed to prevent adults from interfering with students' learning opportunities.
But now it's just become an umbrella.
Right. It's the laws that have to do with it are so vague that, especially this kind of started happening in full force during the civil rights era, but these laws are so vague that they can then be turned around and then interpreted to punish students who are, for whatever reason, seem to be disturbing school. And the laws are often intentionally vague about what disturbing school means.
Yeah. They can lump a lot of things in there.
Right. You can be disturbing school just by showing up with a certain hairstyle that somebody doesn't like. And that is, in fact, by these sets of laws, that is criminalized.
Well, they've left enough room to make it, fit.
Often these sets of laws, as of 2017, there are over 20 states with these laws still in place. They're not actively enforced by all of them, but it's reported that nationally about 10,000 students, juveniles, are charged every year with disturbing school, again, whatever that means, in addition to those that are charged as adults. So this really vague set of laws around the idea of disturbing school, again, the kind of intention behind them has been subverted by people who want to use a vague law to punish students for essentially whatever reason they want to come up with on the spot. So we've got that. And then we've got, kind of hand in hand with that, this set of zero tolerance policies and practices.
This is just a perfect storm. It's just one thing leading to another that's going to give administration, whoever, you know what I mean, the people in charge, to give them the power that they need to, you know what I mean, like, just work the system, like, not in kids' favors, which I hate, because it's all, you know, I think that what you're talking about just now, like these school disturbance laws, were probably thought to be helpful in practice and not evolve in this way.
Yeah, the zero tolerance policy stuff is, in my mind, even a little more difficult to justify. They kind of get their foundation from sort of Reagan era feeling mandatory minimum type stuff. It's very similar verbiage and these kinds of rules and policies. So sort of zero tolerance is, in this case, referring to disciplinary policies that mandate consequences, predetermined consequences, and they're usually very severe. They're usually punitive and exclusionary. So we're talking out of school suspensions and expulsions, mandatory, in response to specific types of misbehavior. Mm-hmm. And it's almost always regardless of context or rationale. So you just, you know, a kid breaks a rule and before you know it, they're just gone. Yeah. They don't get a chance to explain why or how or what might be going on at home. None of that matters when you're talking about a zero tolerance policy. So especially suspensions and expulsions can kind of lead directly into the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of a gray area sometimes because, like, you know, our school is like, has a zero tolerance policy on bullying. Right, but like bullying is something that can also have all kinds of meanings, all types of connotations. Like it can be interpreted and applied in all of these ways to just fit whatever the crime, whatever the kid. Like, so while I think that things like that are attempting, you know, to take care of us and protect the kids especially, it's just kind of setting up again one more place that they can get caught. Like it's just hard.
Yeah, I even remember. And again, we've mentioned before on the show that I attended high school where you now teach, but I remember a kind of gotcha feeling with regard to disciplinary policies. And again, part of that's just being a teenager, so take that as you, as you will.
Fair.
But
yes,
but a sort of environment of not flourishing in education, but more just being afraid to break rules or get caught doing something you didn't know was even breaking a rule, or, you know, there's definitely a sense of, especially with these kinds of zero tolerance policies, there's a sense of everything I do could be scrutinized and interpreted to be wrong in any given moment.
You could just make it work however I needed to for the sake of, yeah.
And I was a generally pretty well-behaved kid. I wasn't in trouble a lot, so I often found myself butting up against what I thought were injustices in the system at the time, and didn't have an opportunity to fight back because doing that at the time meant that I might get in trouble, and I didn't want to get in trouble at the time. So now I'm a little more ornery than I was then, but
you're full of it.
Hey, I am ornery.
You're ornery. Yeah. And I'm a tough guy. We're all the same here. So because of this, the American Psychological Association convened a task force to evaluate the evidence and to make appropriate recommendations regarding zero tolerance policies and practices. An extensive review of the literature found that despite a 20-year history of implementation, there are surprisingly few data that could directly test the assumptions of a zero tolerance approach to school discipline. And the data that are available tend to contradict those assumptions. So moreover, basically, zero tolerance policies may negatively affect the relationship of education with juvenile justice, and they appear to obviously conflict to some degree with current best knowledge concerning adolescent development, which is that this isn't the approach. These big jumps, these automatic OSSs and things like that, like, aren't the answer.
These automatic
out-of-school suspensions. Sorry. that's not the answer to these things. Even though this might be a kid who frequents the office and we got to deal, a lot with, that doesn't mean that them not being here is better for anyone, including the school and also themselves.
Yeah, we'll talk a little more later about if they're not here, where are they? Because that's another troubling part of this trend. So as a result of all of these forces and policies and practices, and as a result of some other events that are happening, at least in the United States, in schools, there's an increased police presence in schools.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they're called school resource officers, which is a nicer sounding name for police in the schools. So what happens oftentimes in under-resourced schools is there's a school to prison pipeline develops because there's an increased reliance on police instead of teachers and admins to maintain discipline. So you have limited staff, limited on-site people to deal with this thing. So a school resource officer kind of sits in as the disciplinarian in schools, monitors the halls, supposed to be watching out for misbehaving kids.
Yeah.
And it's a little hard to justify what you lose when you put a police officer in charge of monitoring the halls versus, what you gain there. So, which is an increase in the school to prison pipeline activity, essentially. And yeah, you and I were talking a little bit before the show started about how we feel about the presence of school resource officers. I think that we at least agreed that a lot of it has to do with the particular resource officer, because you and I have both known some who have been problematic, but you were talking about how
our current one is great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a really big fan. He's a former student, so it was a good feeling to see him come back. And he's invested in the district.
Mm-hmm. And he's well liked among the students.
Yeah, and he's respected, and so I trust that what he's doing is what's right, and I believe in him. And so my first 5 years there, we didn't have one. Though we called in for help, obviously, whenever certain things happened, or you know what I mean, like as it called, but we didn't have one on the day to day. And so now the district has this one. His office is in the high school, so we do see probably more of him than the other schools do, but he goes out and does things with all the levels, and he can be easily, bounced around for whatever he needs to be. So I think in this case, I'm happy to see him, but my role has shifted. Also, I'm a teacher. Mm-hmm. And so now safety and things like that are on my mind more than, maybe what I felt about the resource officer that I had at my home high school, who I wasn't a fan of.
Right.
And so I think also we have to be honest in that people in a position of power aren't well received by all students. And so no matter how nice the person is, or you know what I mean? And it's the same thing with administration too. Some kids just have a really hard time with that. Mm-hmm. So I think you're going to see a disconnect. It's not perfect at any school with any SRO, but I'm personally happy to have them in the hallways on the day-to-day.
Part of the issue with some school resource officers and other kinds of police in schools is that they often don't have a whole lot of training, or sometimes no training at all with working with youth. As a result of that, children are far more likely to be subject to school-based arrests, and the majority of those are for nonviolent offenses. Mm-hmm. Sort of what we were talking about before about interrupting the school day. So it's for disruptive behavior. Far more likely to be arrested for nonviolent offenses than they were a generation ago,
because of the
prevalence of.
There we go. Thanks.
Yeah, because of the prevalence of police in schools.
Gotcha. So basically, schools are more likely to jump to that level just by having them in-house is kind of where it's coming from.
Right.
The assumption.
Part of the issue around all of this is that there is, depending on who you talk to, no evidence or very little evidence that police in schools improve school safety on the whole. And in many cases, they can be seen to be harming the overall level of safety in schools. There are some well-designed studies that suggest that the presence of school resource officers prevents student crime, but there are a greater number of studies using credible methods to compare schools with and without SROs, suggesting there's either no impact on student crime rates or that the addition of resource officers is associated with increased student misconduct. It's kind of what you were talking about before.
Yeah.
A lot of, especially kids, you got to keep in mind these are kids, do not respond well to
authority figures,
to a figure who is just there to tell you what to do and almost nothing else. They're there to discipline. And you can imagine, for all sorts of reasons, kids from all kinds of different homes come to school bring all kinds of different burdens. They're kids. They're not well equipped to deal with the nuances of interacting with police officers. And they're not even well equipped to deal with the nuances of interacting with adults generally sometimes. So this is not specific. This is not specific to police.
Ask me on any day of the week, my answer changes.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of inconsistent data, but generally speaking, there's so little data that supports the idea that resource officers actually increase school safety that there's a lot of activism that's developed around this issue because of its impact on the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah. And it's going to come up a little bit more towards the end.
Yeah.
This kind of rule. Do you want to tell the story?
No. Hold on. Let's talk a little bit about one of the big problems with the school to prison pipeline as it is now, and that's that it seems to disproportionately affect disadvantaged students and minority students. So why don't we talk about this little story of Consuelo Bautista?
Yeah. So this was from a website called the Century Foundation. They're a progressive, nonpartisan think tank that seeks to foster opportunity, reduce inequality, and promote security at home and abroad. And this piece was by Kimberly Quick, and so it's a great piece. It's really well written. It told a really great story, I thought, from start to finish, and she was able to like kind of cover she just ran it all with this piece, but she has more. She seems to be maybe from North Carolina. A lot of her pieces are about that general area. We're talking about a place just outside of Greensboro, but there's more to read from her, and she seems incredibly well versed in this stuff. So if you're looking for a good read on this type of information, I'd really recommend her piece on the Century Foundation. But this young lady, Consuelo Bautista, the story goes that before her morning class began, Consuelo headed straight to the principal's office. The day before, the southeastern Randolph Middle School girl had gotten into an altercation with another student. Though the school allowed Consuelo to go home and return to campus the next day, determining that the conflict was not likely to escalate, she was met at the principal's office by sheriff's deputies the next morning. Acting with her frustration as a teenager, she began to curse at the cops and pulled out her cell phone to call her brother. The deputies there arrested her and in the process left 2 garish contusions on the 13-year-old's face. According to Consuelo, who is black, the officers, angered by her attitude and defiance, pressed her against the wall, struck her, and forced her to go to the ground as one pressed a knee into her back. Randolph, North Carolina is just south of Greensboro. In the Randolph County school system, black students represent just 3.8% of the entire student population, but they represent 26.8% of filed juvenile complaints, and this is reflective nationally. Like, this is not just a Randolph County thing.
That's a huge number. And just the disproportionate, 3.8% of the student population, but 26.8% of filed
more than
juvenile
1 in 4.
complaints.
I can't imagine.
So it just for our listeners, we were talking about this before the show started, but that kind of number makes no sense. And you can come up with a lot of reasons for why that number might be. You can speculate as to the home life of certain kinds of populations, or whatever it is, family values. You can speculate all you wish, but the reality of this problem is that Black and brown students are being disproportionately affected by the school to prison pipeline. They just are, regardless of cause. And I think that there's a huge problem there in a sort of civil rights way that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, so the Department of Ed's, their civil rights database during the 2016-17 school year, they stated that schools suspended 2.7 million students during that year. This number was about 100,000 students lower than what the federal data was last collected in 2013-14. But Black boys still made up 25% of all students suspended out of school, and Black girls made up another 14%, even though they only account for about 8% of all students.
8%?
Yeah, total. At the same time, Black children, about 15% of all students during the 2015-16 year, were 31% of those arrested or referred to, with police for an in-school behavior issue.
Right. So these numbers were everything just and fair. We should see parity between the percentage of students who are Black.
Mm-hmm. Shouldn't matter.
And the percentage of those being referred for behavior issues. It should be a 1-to-1.
Mm-hmm.
Should.
It's not, but it should be.
Not even close.
And so we briefly mentioned it, but like out of school suspensions are one of these problems. In 2015, a study was led by Dan Lowson of UCLA's Civil Rights Project, and they were able to estimate that public school children lost an estimated 18 million days of instruction in the 2011-12 school year because of these, exclusionary discipline policies and practices.
I can't even wrap my head around
it's
how
not
much...
even a number I can fathom, honestly. It's so outrageous.
I can't even think about how much instruction time that really is.
In my head, I can't even wrap my head around what that looks like. Like, to lose 18 million school days. But let's put all the data back on the teacher and blame it on them. No?
That's our favorite pastime
never
here in
mind.
America.
Okay, so anyways, another recent study by the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, confirms that students of color, regardless of their economic background, they suffer harsher discipline for equal or lesser offenses than do their white peers. For years, federal civil rights investigations have revealed that many school districts consistently invoke more severe punishments against minority students when compared to non-minority students. Even if their behaviors are the exact same and they had a similar history, like disciplinary-wise, they would be treated so much differently. So black students are most often disciplined for more subjective offenses, such as disrespect, loitering, making noise, excessive noise. But white schoolmates are more likely to get in trouble for really clear things. Smoking, skipping school, vandalism. Like, it's very cut and dry. Whereas the black students aren't being held to like the same types of standards. It's more vague, like what they get in trouble for. Because there's more room, to apply whatever they need to. Whereas white students, it's just like, oh, you skip school.
These kinds of subjective rules and policies that we talked about are more often and very disproportionately applied to black and brown students. Yeah.
And my school, like the district that you went to school in and where I work now, we don't have a whole lot of variety. We're mostly white. I would say, oh my gosh, 95% white probably throughout the school district. So it's hard for me to really talk about this kind of impact, I guess, at my school because we don't have the diversity that sort of suggests that the data would, that offers it, I guess. But I do see students of ours who are treated differently because of past history. And I think that in my school, it seems that repeat offenders are treated differently at times. So even though like minority populations aren't very well represented at my high school, I still see the school to prison pipeline happening in some ways. We deal with drugs a lot of times. Like, that's kind of the thing that we keep resorting to as far as like what's happening in the school. Last week we had to go on a soft lockdown, which just means that your day is happening as normal. You just can't let anyone in and out. I like to go to the restroom or something like that, run errands. Because they brought in drug dogs just to, check out the lockers and things like that. So I still see it happening, but also Ohio is just flooded with drug crimes and things like that. So we're kind of at the heart of a lot of the drug issues. So I see that school to prison pipeline.
The opioid
because that's
epidemic hit this region very hard, and I'm sure is impacting a lot of the school to prison pipeline in your district.
Yeah. So, and that's what I see the most. I would say it's
that
more
stuff is happening at home for these kids.
Yes, it is. Oh yeah, and
it's common.
But Southeastern Ohio is nearly the home of the opioid epidemic as far as Ohio goes, and so we see a lot of it on the daily. A lot of kids moving in and out quickly, like we see turnover, like that kind of stuff. So the school to prison pipeline for me looks more like that. It's more drug based than it is race based, just because we don't have the minority groups represented like some of these schools do, but it's still happening. Mm-hmm. It's just what they're being caught with and doing might be different or might be the same because they're still teenagers.
Right.
But I just see it. It's so different in Ohio.
And it just makes you wonder how much less often it would be happening if the school were better staffed with the kinds of people that these kids need to be able to talk to.
Yeah. I mean, we have teenagers, so like we've got kids who try to bring alcohol to school. We've got kids, you know what I mean? Like we've got your run of the mill stuff. Like our kids love their jewels and whatever. Like those things all happen. And I'm not trying to be dismissive and let teenagers do what they will, but like you have to also accept that there's a healthy dose of that comes with them. So, but that doesn't mean that this pipeline is the answer for these kids. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to fix it.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the goal of this pipeline in general. If it's to reduce crime and violence in schools, we've got to ask, is that working?
So I'm going to step on my soapbox And this will be a later topic. We haven't gotten into it, but we're going to talk about school shootings and just school safety. We've only kind of like glossed at it, but it's only important because of this Dear Colleague letter that's going to come up. And this is a result of the Obama era administration, the Department of Ed, Department of Justice. And so this Dear Colleague letter encouraged schools to reduce interactions with law enforcement and to examine if their discipline policies have an unfair effect or impact on students according to race, color, origin, all of those things. So it's coming from this. So after the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting, which was February 14, 2018, I'm not going to mention the shooter's name, but there were 17 dead and 17 injured in that shooting. And so police and schools started to become like they were put in the news after that shooting. Like it really shifted the conversation surrounding what it looks like to have a police officer in a school, what it does, all those things. So some since then have argued in favor of assigning more armed police officers to schools and even arming teachers in hopes of deterring future mass shootings. Do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay. So the final report of the Federal Commission on School Safety suggests that states and the school districts consider both of these strategies. Two main claims made by proponents of increased policing are that school resource officers can control and prevent crime among students and prevent or thwart future attacks, like an armed attack. The existing evidence for SROs increasing safety is mixed, so it's not super clear if it's actually doing what they think it would. So there's strong evidence of unintended harmful consequences that come with their programs, like of having a police officer in the school, including throwing more of them into the SPP, essentially. So it's
more
not
students into the criminal justice system.
Yes. So it's not super clear that it's helping, but it's not super clear that it's hurting. So we're kind of in this in-between.
It is clear that it's hurting. Right?
Well, I'm sorry. I was talking about increased shootings. We're not seeing that data.
Gotcha. We're seeing very little data relating to this having an impact at all on these high-profile violence cases.
Right.
Or even, not high-profile ones. But the link between school resource officers and violence reduction is very tenuous. There's really no clear data one way or another, but there's I would say a strong push for more school resource officers because people think that will solve a lot of the problems of crime and violence in schools.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned the Dear Colleague letter. That's where this is coming from. So the current administration has said that the Dear Colleague letter is limiting rights of teachers in schools, inciting that high school, Marjory Stoneman Douglas, shooting as support. And essentially what they think is that this letter allowed the shooter to be in the school. However, the student, and this is known, this is not, I'm on my soapbox, but this is true. He was known. He had been disciplined by the school. He was known and handled by local police. And so that argument is invalid and weak. Like there's really no support for that. I won't get into Marjory Stoneman Douglas, but this kid was known. So he wasn't someone that like slipped through the cracks or that the school was stuck not being able to handle because the school was aware of him and the local authorities were aware of him as well.
So this Dear Colleague letter, it was the Obama era's recasting of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So this letter we're talking about sort of recognizes that school safety has to include rather than come at the expense of dignity of Black and brown students. So essentially what you're saying is that this kind of Obama era guidance, the current admin and some, administrations and other groups have argued that this sort of ties the hands of schools in crime prevention.
From properly handling someone like this shooter, essentially.
Right.
Is what they were getting at.
The argument is that a shooter like the one at Parkland can get away with what he got away with because of this Dear Colleague letter.
Which isn't the case.
It's not the case for a lot of reasons, and one of the main ones is that the person who committed this shooting had been expelled from school prior to the shooting and was well known to law enforcement. They never found cause to arrest him. So, you can't arrest someone without cause. Now, for whatever reason, law enforcement never found what they considered to be just cause to arrest him. So they could not pull him out of the environment in which he caused so much havoc to begin with. So increasing police presence in a place where the police can't do anything about a problematic situation anyway.
Yeah.
Apparently, for whatever reason, doesn't solve the problem.
No,
clearly.
it's hard. I'm like sitting here thinking like, I don't want to blame the school. I don't want to blame the police. You know what I mean? Like, it's so much more like delicate than just that. Like, you can't pin it on this one thing for whatever reason the administration has hung on to, which is this dear colleague letter. Like, it's just not that simple. You can't put that on something that was trying
the current
to help represent.
Right. The current administration is trying to benefit from the divisiveness of this dear colleague letter because it targets racial disparities.
Right.
And they're trying to make a claim that anti-discrimination provisions are what essentially precipitated that school shooting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can be honest in saying that because he was a white male who committed it, it's a completely different thing.
That's the issue, is that obviously anti-discrimination provisions aren't getting in the way.
Right.
When
it's not their fault.
I can't help but say a majority of these school shooters that we've seen in our recent history are white students, white males. So
that's
there's
another
not a lot,
topic altogether if you want me to start yelling.
Yeah, again, it's very nuanced. I think we're going to do a whole show about
here's what we can say.
School shootings. But
go out and vote, right? Be heard. Do your research. Support mental health resources for all kinds of people, not just students. And just like think about this stuff. Like
get on your local school board.
Well, I want to, yes, all of them. Please join them all. Get in there and help them.
And the reason we kind of need this call to action for all of us to become involved and become more educated about this issue is because in a lot of jurisdictions, there are really intense side effects of the school to prison pipeline. Yeah. There are students who, because they've been suspended or expelled, don't have a right to an education anymore. Sometimes they're sent to disciplinary alternative schools, which honestly, there's this sort of growing cottage industry of these shadow systems that are often run by private for-profit companies. Because they're private and for-profit, they're immune from kind of the accountability standards that you and I know as familiar to public school teachers. They don't have to worry about minimum classroom hours and curriculum requirements and all kind of graduation requirements. They're just sort of like, they're just sort of existing. Well, and the benefit of keeping these students away physically from their peers.
And they come back to public school and they do what they can to return. You know what I mean? Because it's comfortable and it's all kinds of things for them.
Well, as a result of all of this, struggling students, if and when they do return to their regular schools, they're unprepared and they're permanently locked into this sort of system of inferior education, like, the settings, their teachers, their curricula, all these things are sort of funneled through that filter of what happened to them in an alternative school or in the juvenile justice system. Even if you're a juvenile who has served your time in the juvenile justice system, there's no easy path to getting back on
it's hard to come back. You've missed. You've lost time with your, your core, all your teachers. And it's the same thing with out-of-school suspensions. Like, I hate when we put kids in out-of-school suspension because for so many of them, they come to school and that's a safe place and it's a warm place and there's food. And, like, for some of them, that might be the most constant thing that they have. So, like, and a lot of those kids are the same ones who fall into that school to, prison pipeline. So I hate to see those kids, especially because they're the ones I want to see at school. I want to know they got food. I want to know they've, like been taken care of, at least briefly. We're some of the most, solid things in their lives, even if they're not, none of us are their favorite people, obviously, but we're there every day and not all of them have that. So, but out of school suspensions, right? In school suspensions, even sometimes aren't really helping kids, but that's a different setup as well. But out of school suspensions is, these things aren't setting them up to come back any better than they were.
Right.
And we're taking away from them, maybe that, I don't know, some of them just need it. Like, they just need that 7:15 to 2:30
stability.
They just got to be there.
It's especially important given what's happening to the brains of children during this developmental period. You can't experience that kind of jarring, dissociating from your friend groups and your regular school situation and expect people to just bounce back from that. Well, teenagers especially expect teenagers to bounce back from these highly traumatic experiences. So like I was saying, there's this whole industry that's popped up around keeping kids out of school. Kids who are either at risk of or already entering the school to prison pipeline. There is money to be had by people who keep them out of schools, and that it's fairly well established that those kinds of programs that keep kids out of schools do not in fact benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, and they cost schools too. So
They're
it's not
expensive. It's expensive to, get rid of those students who are pulling down your test scores, like NCLB, those issues that we were talking about before. On the other hand, though, it's good to see that there's a lot of advocacy popping up around this issue.
The one that I found today is called Rehabilitation Enables Dreams. They go by RED. It's a 501c3 nonprofit and restorative justice organization. They're out of Atlanta. And so their mission is keeping people out of the criminal justice system permanently through programs that enhance the social, financial, and civic literacy of individuals referred to the court. They offer a 12-month restorative justice curriculum, and they want to help their participants with the knowledge and skills necessary to come back out of the system, enter society, and become thriving members of the community. So they want them to be invested. And that was one of the places that I found a lot of the information today for the school to prison pipeline, and they seem to be doing a lot of really great work in Atlanta for that project as well. Big fan. Yeah. Great website.
Good.
Very helpful. You would have liked it.
Check it out. So like we mentioned, pretty heavy topic this week. I think that probably about wraps it up from us for now. I wouldn't be surprised if we revisit parts of this topic.
I'm going to be thinking about this one for a while.
Yeah.
I already have some things I wish I would have said.
Yeah.
I want to help them all.
We struggled a lot with this because you at least more immediately see some of the impacts of the school to prison pipeline.
What this tells me, though, is that it's a story worth telling. Even by trying to do our best, we've at least brought some awareness to this, and that some schools are stuck in this, and that it seems to be an answer, but it isn't actually helping, and so it's just kind of a pitfall as far as what we're really getting into. And it's an issue of Maslow's too. We talked about that. We'll do Maslow's later.
Yeah, a lot of these are systematic and inherited issues that come from all kinds of it's just systematic inequalities at work is what's happening here. So it can feel very difficult to want to affect change, but
it's giving it space, and it's giving it a name, and it's giving it the umbrella like we talked about. Yeah. Like schools have all kinds of wiggle room to call it whatever they want. So
we felt it was important to cover the topic, even with our sort of limited approach to it, because we think it's an issue that maybe people don't know as much about as they should, and we want to put it on people's radar.
Yeah. And maybe you'll see it in action. I mean, I'm sure there are other teachers listening who can more easily identify this kind of very specific thing happening than you or I have seen, or we can. So I'd be interested to hear what it looks like for other people.
Right. And I'd love to throw in a little bit of a call to action, and that's it. If you're in a position of relative privilege, use that privilege to shine a light on some of these injustices that are causing so many of these problems. Step in and help when and where you can. Try to be a voice for equality, especially in schools, because it's for a lot of people, public school is the one chance we have to help them go from somewhere they don't want to be to somewhere where they're thriving.
I tell my kids all the time, you don't want to be a bystander. And that's all of this, this system makes it easy to be. But that doesn't mean you should be.
Good. Let's wrap it up.
Be an upstander.
Be an upstander. All right, let's wrap it up with what we learned this week.
I've learned a lot this week. I have learned that I don't know anything about Reddit.
Reddit?
I thought I knew about Reddit.
The website?
Yeah. I've been trying to promote the podcast. Just one of the things.
Build some connections, do some networking.
Well, yeah. And also I've learned a lot, which has been great. I was learning about our YouTube channel from this really nice guy today who runs a podcast. But Reddit's kind of hard. It's a very unique corner of the universe. It's just its own land out there. Do you disagree?
Well, why is it?
Okay,
why is it difficult? Tell me a little more about that.
I was trying to. So there's the subreddit podcasts, and I was trying to post ours. There's a weekly thing where you can promote your own podcast. So I wrote up the whole thing: link, description, who we are, everything, which was not the simplest thing I've ever done. I posted it, and it was you're under review. I was okay. And then 10 minutes later, it was you're a bot.
You're a bot.
So
Go away. You're a bot.
so you have to have karma points and like post points and like responding points and like you have to interact basically. But I just joined the subreddit like yesterday and just tried to promote it.
And by the way, we're not trying to spam. We're really just interested in trying to grow our audience a little bit.
But I just like Reddit. I thumb through Reddit a lot. Like, I just really enjoy it. But I wasn't aware that there were points involved and I was losing. So anyways, maybe someday I'll get to be privileged enough to be featured. But for right now, I'm learning a lot about the YouTube channel. And so it's still a good thing to learn, but mostly I was like, oh, this will be a nice little thing for me to use to learn something. And they just told me I was a bot. So I was kind of devastated about that.
Well, I mean, I guess one thing to know for our listeners is that, like you were saying, we have a YouTube channel now where some people prefer to listen to podcasts on YouTube. So we're reposting all of our audio files with a little bit of a visualization there on a YouTube channel. We'll get a link to that up on the website pretty soon if you prefer to listen to your podcast that way. What I learned this week also has to do with getting this podcast out into the world.
Who knew this was going to be such a
It's becoming a
labor
time
of
commitment.
love.
we really are enjoying it, and we're learning a lot about all kinds of things. But one thing I've always sort of wanted to know how to do is to use this program called AfterEffects, which it helps people do animations. So I'm using it, and I finally learned this week how to do this sort of little visualizer thing that you might have seen on our Instagram posts. I think they're cross-posted to Facebook, and they're also showing up on YouTube now. So After Effects is it's one of those big Adobe programs. It's a little bit mystifying, and I've always wanted to know how to do some of these cute little animation things on there. I'm probably going to dive in even deeper as time goes on, but it was fun to learn how to do that this week and spent a few hours doodling around with that and had a lot of fun, and the end result turned out pretty well.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, please.
It's been so fun to get this podcast out there. Like, we've heard from some really great people. Friends, my old teachers, like one of my old band teachers got a hold of me about the music ed podcast. Like it's been so much fun to hear from people that love us and support us like in our day-to-day lives that also are showing up for this little podcast right now. And so it's just, I don't know, it just like makes me all, kind of emotional about it because we've got like so many good people who are out there trying to help us do this thing.
Right. It makes us feel really good to hear from you all, hear your feedback. So we hope you stick around.
Also, go watch Love is Blind on Netflix.
Oh, yeah. This is a thing we both learned about this week. A joint learning, if you will.
It's trash TV.
If you enjoy trash TV.
Who doesn't?
And need something to help you unwind at the end of the day.
Exactly. I was going to say, go into it when you just like want your brain to be mush for a little while. It's great.
Well, part of the reason you're watching it is because some of your kids are interested in the show, right?
A bunch of my my seniors are very into this. And they were like, have you seen this? And so
she has to know because it's a kind of social currency for Kate.
And also, if I don't watch it, they're just going to tell me. So I might as well experience it on my own accord.
Experience the dumpster.
It's better than having teenagers tell you about it, surprisingly. Even though they're the home of the dumpsters.
Yep. It's good sometimes to just turn off your brain and let the American trash culture wash over you.
When you say it like that, I can't wait to go watch more.
Swimming in trash. All right, does that about wrap it up?
I'm done.
All right, we'll be back next episode. Thanks for listening.
See ya.
Hey listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show. If I produced Love is Blind, I would lock down the pods halfway through the speed dating and turn them into escape rooms.